Here we go. Welcome to the video channel of Hotelier Indonesia magazine. I'm Bill Healey. I'm one of the content providers and editors of the publication. For those of you new to Hotelier Indonesia magazine, we're a B2B publication where we introduce new products, new concepts, and updates on the hotel, hospitality, and leisure industry for Indonesia and Southeast Asia. Our current issue is a focus on golf. It's with golf developers, golf designers, and golf management companies. And today we're fortunate to speak with Brian Curley. He's one of the directors of Schmidt-Curley Design, one of the leading providers of golf design within the industry. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you, Bill. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Could you give us a bit of a background on how you got involved with golf?
Yeah, well, I kind of stumbled into. I grew up in my early years. I grew up in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. But when I was in about sixth grade or so, my family we moved to Monterey Peninsula. So I grew up in Pebble Beach. I actually grew up in Pebble Beach. Wow, assume the only architect that ever has. Any rate, so my first job was I was the cart boy at Spyglass, and I picked the range and caddied Pebble, Spyglass, Cypress Point, and just grew up playing a lot of golf as a youngin, and so been around the golf business all my life. I think I've only had one non-golf job in my entire life for a brief period of time, just fresh out of college. But I've basically been around golf all my life, and I think that upbringing in Pebble Beach was important in that I grew up. It's not just that I grew up on a golf course, but I grew up on crazy good world-class golf. So my understanding of what a golf course was in my early days of introduction was pretty driven towards world class. So then as I got into the business later on, it was easy to revert back to that and understand kind of what that was all about. It's kind of funny at the time. It's so easy. If you want to be a golf architect today, you get online and there's so many sites and chat groups and photos. And, if you want to explore the world of golf, it's a few, touches of a keyboard away, and boom, there comes images of everywhere. Back when I was there was one book, I don't remember, it's called The World Atlas of Golf. That was like the only really book that showed courses around the world, and little kind of hand-drawn plans with a little write-up. But there was, and the other funny thing about it too is there's attention paid to golf architects nowadays. When a golf course comes online, unbuilt, and it's open, who designed it, and they market it around Jack Nicklaus or Greg Norman or whatever. When I was growing up, I remember going into the pro shop in Spyglass, and I'm probably 14 years old or something, and I was thinking, yeah, I like that Cypress Point place over there. I think that's a really good golf course. Who designed that one? Like, who designed that? And nobody knew. I mean, nobody in the pro shop knew. And the point is that would be unheard of today. I mean, everybody knows Alistair McKenzie or Tillinghast or Ross or whatever. But back in the day, that was really not a thing. Like there were famous golf courses, there were renowned golf courses, there were highly ranked golf courses. And I think there probably were a few people in the know, in the business at the top of the food chain who kind of were aware of it. But like, who designed your golf course was not a thing in that period of time. It's kind of like there are a few famous building architects today, but you can go downtown most building in most American cities or whatever cities around the world today, and there's a famous building, but no one's going to tell you who designed it. I mean, you have to be a pretty good architecture aficionado to know that Frank Gehry did that one or whatever. Some people do, but the general population, and it was kind of the same way back then. But what happened, I think, and it's kind of when I came around in the golf business, is there were golf courses and there was housing. And in the kind of the 80s, those two blended, and you started developing golf communities. Before that, you lived here and you played golf there and you went back. Then they started blending golf and housing. So they had to market not only the house, but you would market it with the golf. So now the person who did your golf course became part of the marketing tool for the golf community. And I think it was like the beginning of this, and that's right when Nicklaus was getting involved, and you had to have a Nicklaus course and you had to have all this. But really prior to that, it was just kind of I remember when I first talked to a golf architect, I was like 15 when I decided that's what I wanted to do. Well, it was funny. Actually, the real story, I was in the snack bar at Spyglass, and there was a little frame on the wall, like behind you, and there was a picture of a guy, and it said Robert Trent Jones, golf course architect.
Wow.
And I thought, and I'm like 13, and I thought, you get paid to design golf courses? That's a job. And so I went to the pro shop. I said, "Who's this guy?" And they're like, yeah. He does these golf courses. And at the time, I think the A.S.G.C.A, I think I had 50 members, maybe.
Wow.
And so, and like 3 were in California. One of them, Robert Muir Graves, I wasn't even old enough to drive. I had my mom drive me up to the Bay Area to meet with him. And I went to his little place at a little ranch, and there was an office in the back. And I was thinking, I want to do this. And he just said, well, you got to carry a guy's suitcase for 30 years until finally you get your own golf course. And so I kind of caught lightning in a bottle, because I got out of school, and I got in with Landmark Land Company, which was right in that blending period of housing and golf. And we did PJ West and La Quinta and all these places. And I got in with Pete Dye. And so I just like, boom, I just got like a real crash course in that golf design world. And when really just fresh out of college. So in the early 80s.
You mentioned Alistair McKenzie too. Where I grew up in West Michigan, just about an hour and a half or 2-hour drive north of me was Crystal Downs Golf Club. And that's an Alistair McKenzie course that most people never heard of. And it's very highly ranked, but nobody's ever heard of it. So I see how the designers and the courses back in the day were not as well known.
Well, I think that, I think there are probably a number of architects that really never had the attention during their lives, and in the, well past the time that they've passed on, they've kind of had, there's been a renewed interest, because there certainly is a renewed interest in that kind of, the golden era of golf design and early days of golf design, and as opposed to that era where you found a holes as opposed to created golf holes. A lot of it goes in, well, really, oddly enough, back in the day, you found holes. And then in the 80s and 90s, where blend came in and you were creating developments, you were manhandling properties into something, and dirt was flying and you were moving millions of yards of dirt, you were creating golf courses. But the pendulum's kind of shifted back to where a lot of what's going on in golf today is really, and the courses that get the most attention are the abandoned dunes or the sand hills or the thing where it's a natural site, and they go, you find golf holes again. So that finding golf hole aspect of golf design, that pendulum has come back to there. In some markets, there's still that create the big, the all-encompassing development, housing, resorts, whatever. But there's a lot more of just standalone golf, which really wasn't the case when I was first getting started. The idea of a standalone golf course, they're very few and far between. They typically were, housing developments, and then that got overbuilt. But that, like I said, that's kind of come back, and it's certainly come back in other markets. We focus so much on Asia and other markets like that, and that's certainly the case in those places where they're just building really just standalone golf.
Well, growing up as a caddy, you probably got to understand the course better than most golfers do, and I would think being able to read courses, you were able to it would have an impact on your design.
Well, I think that okay, part of it too is growing up, I always had an artistic hand. I could draw the best dragster when I was in 6th grade, or the best whatever, I always could draw, and I have an artistic skill. So that blend of art and kind of understanding of golf was something that came to me pretty easily. And actually, I tell you the story when I went and saw Robert Muir Graves as a kid. But he basically told me, he says, "Hey, anybody can play golf. Everybody has great ideas. Everybody thinks of what a good golf hole should be, but very few people can put an idea to plan. So you got to learn how to draw. You got to learn how to, like put an idea down on paper, because you can't be there every day. You could be able to relay what it is you're trying to do. And so that when you're absent and come back, things progress." And so, which was not an issue. I knew that, but so it was kind of like, and at the time, there was really no paved, there was no book on how you become a golf architect. I just like, well, you better get a degree in, some sort of, architectural type of degree where you can create plans. But you got to wear a lot of hats. You got to understand golf. You got to play golf at a certain level. You got to be able to hit certain shots. You got to know players. You got to know other courses. You got to be an engineer. You got to be an agronomist. You got to be a lot of things in one, right? Yeah. And so you really, your education is to I think, to be exposed to as many aspects of that world as much as possible in your early days. And like I said, I was, I got the caddying and being around, I've caddying in tournaments and the Crosby and the PGA and so I understood the golf at that level. And like I said, when I got out I started working for Landmark in '84. My first day on the job there was the day PGOS was approved at City Council, and we started moving dirt the next day. Wow. And Pete Dye was right there, and so I just got thrown into the fire. And it was just like rapid paced. We just couldn't pop out enough courses fast enough. And then as the US is slowing down, I got an opportunity to be involved with China just as their growth spurt was happening. So I got involved there and just went, we just had a headlock on China for a number of years. And so I've been fortunate, it's been a right place, right time for me to a large extent.
What could you tell me about Schmidt-Curley Design? What was your first course, and how did you grow from where to where?
Well, okay, so the Schmidt, Lee Schmidt was actually, when I was working in that period of time, PJ West and the Landmark days, he was my boss, and he had worked a lot with Pete Dye. He had built a number of courses with Pete, and the Landmark people wanted Pete to be there more and all that. And Pete said, well, you can have Lee. Lee can move there. So Lee moved and, would run jobs. And so, but Lee was a construction guy, knew design from the construction agronomy end, but Lee, just like Pete, couldn't draw his own breath. Lee couldn't draw, Pete couldn't draw. So they relied on me to put plans together. And so I got, so I was fortunate because, Pete was a great visionary, but he would chicken scratch a plan out, right? I mean, it was, you couldn't tell, what it was. So, and then I could draw and do grading plans and all kinds of stuff. So I would put their ideas together. So we worked together then, and then there was, it's a long story, but Lee went and worked for Nicholas for a number of years. And then when I decided to go off my own, I decided that the best way to do work was to have two people so that you can kind of tag team, so that someone that says, because it's such a hands-on experience, to really do construction. Sure, plans are important, vision's important, playbook's important, but you really got to be there on site. You have to be there every day, but you can't just drop off plans and come back a year later and expect it to be right. It doesn't matter how good your plans are. Adjustments are made and the magic happens in the field. It doesn't happen on plan. And so it's important to be there at certain times. So I just thought, I rather than do this on my own, I'd rather hook up, and I'll hook up with Lee. So we did that in like 97 or so. And so at that time, I already kind of had my foot in the door in China. And so we just, boom, had just like that was just like perfect timing for what was going on in the business. And we just had a lot of work right out the gate. And we just really did for many, many years. Lee kind of retired off about 4 years ago and so I'm really kind of running it on myself here and with my support team. Got a good group of people who get things done. We make great plans. I got like a representation around the world. So it's important.
How many countries are you in now, do you think?
We've worked, I think to date, we've worked something short of 30 in the high 20s. And, again, a lot of that was we kind of really had a headlock on China for a number of years. We did about 50 courses in China alone. So, but China's really stopped. They've really pulled the plug on golf there. And so it kind of been, forced off into new areas, which is really Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, Laos, all those kind of the Asian countries, but in the same time, Indonesia, the latest, and also now kind of branching off into Saudi and other areas. So I kind of had to like pick up my ball and go to other places, because you can only do so many down the street. You'd love to do a lot of courses, 2 miles away, but there's only so many, you can only do so many around your house. You gotta get on a plane and go somewhere.
Exactly. And I was in Vietnam. I've been in Vietnam countless number of times, but I was there first in about 1998 or late last century. And I think there were only 3 courses at that time in Vietnam, and they've just boomed over the last 20 years. It's amazing.
Yeah, there's kind of parallels to China, because China was that way, and then China went boom. China went from none to, I don't know, 500 or 600 in about a 20-year period, and then they kind of been backing off. They're pulling the plug on all that. Yeah. But Vietnam is kind of the same way. It's starting to burst out. But the difference is very few of the Chinese sites are very good. Most of the time, in China, you get the land that they can't grow any food on. So you get the mountain or the side of a hill, and so you have to kind of like manhandle it into something that resembles golf. Whereas in Vietnam, you get some of those sites, but in Vietnam, you can get, if the coastline is just like from here to down there, and there's nothing but just world-class golf sites all along the coastline. And oddly enough is, if you think about it, you have the ocean, you have these dunes, which are great for golf, but the farming and the villages, they don't, nobody has a village with ocean front views. They don't really care. They're tucked back behind the dunes out of the wind. And then they have that's where all your ice fields and that's where all your production is. But the actual sand dunes are difficult to grow any kind of crops on, because there's the water just goes right through, and it's sand, and it's hard to get to, and there's big dunes, and and so oddly enough, those are the kind of the sites that are available. There's a lot of sites like that are available that don't require displacing villages, which is not the case in China. So
yeah, it's a perfect situation.
but that's why you see a lot. That's why you see a lot of things happening along the coastline. Is there really isn't that impediment that you get in other countries?
Well, a lot of links courses along the coast there, and I've played a few of them, and they're fantastic. So
yeah, and it's I'd say it's first of all, again, kind of unlike China, where listen, there Hainan Island, it's blue sky. So most China properties, it comes with a gray sky at best. You don't get those really clear, beautiful blue skies, right? And so, but you do get it in Vietnam is blue sky, white clouds, white sand, blue ocean, marshes, forests. It's just like this sensory overload of color.
exactly.
On all of these properties, and so it's just and there's it's one of those sites where you just find golf holes. You don't really have to create so much, so it's nice.
Yeah. And in China, I believe you've done some work with Mission Hills.
Well, I got involved with Mission Hills early on. That was really the my entree, just first foot in the door in China, and over a 15-year period or something like that. I think I did 22 courses. I mean, basically, I just I got involved with Mission Hills, and I was their guy for everything they did for all those years. And between the properties outside of Hong Kong, which is there's 12 courses at Mission Hills, Dongguan and Shenzhen, there's 12 there, and then we went down to Hainan. And those I worked with different signature name tour pros, and then we went down to Hainan Island, which is their Hawaii, and we did 10 courses there on basically lava terrain, because again, they don't want to give you land that produces food, but this kind of no man's land of just lava is, it's pretty sparsely in terms of any kind of agricultural use. Food production use is pretty limited. So that's kind of the land where the government, they say, okay, well, you can put it here. So you got to bring dirt in and put dirt on top of the lava in order to create something to build up from. So it's not tough, but it's not like it's not like sand dunes, that's for sure. So, but that was crazy. So we built 10 courses in I think like 3 years there.
Wow.
We just kind of started and never stopped.
Well, in your years of work, designing courses and constructing courses, and your international travels, were there any difficulties you've run into, and how you overcame those difficulties?
Oh, yeah, that's
Whole book on that.
that's a long interview there. Well, there's I guess difficulties come in different ways. There's the sites themselves. Mission Hills, Dongguan, for instance, we moved. There's the 5-course complex. We moved something like 40 million cubic meters. And for those who are listening, that's a lot of dirt, rock. Just like site like that, you couldn't walk the property, 30, 40 meter cuts and fills. Imagine that. And like, this is crazy. This is totally, we had 2,000 pieces of equipment working 24 hours a day. So we had one day, and this is, people in the golf business don't believe me, that's true. We had one day where we moved 325,000 cubic meters, which is 350 plus thousand yards, one day. Most golf courses don't move that over a 2-year period in the construction of a golf course, and we did it overnight. And so that just gives you an idea of how fast paced the process is there in China. And at the time, the client, they were aware of the impending upcoming moratorium ban on golf that was going to land at this date. So we had like this window to get things done. And so it was just crazy. But outstanding golf. We had the World Cup there, and we had
yeah.
awesome events, and world-class golf still. But really, you talk about, there's really, you have your sites where you go scratch around and find golf holes, and then you've got sites that you can't even walk, and you just have to you just got to come in there and just do crazy dirt moves to get it to a terrain that resembles what's anything you play golf on.
Wow. Now, how does weather and climate affect some of your properties? I believe that Southeast Asia is perfect with a lot of rain and a lot of tropical
Yeah,
weather.
well, yeah. So, okay, so I'm sitting right now. Our main office here, I'm in Arizona, and here it's minimal turf because water's at a premium. You hardline your irrigation. You save water all you can, and nothing's going to grow until you put water on it, right? Even in the cooler part of the years. And then and we do work around the Southwest. We've done plenty of desert golf courses and etc. We've actually done golf courses in Southeast Asia where you can plant and grow in a golf course without an irrigation system. If you plant during the rainy season, you can, if you're in if you want to, you could go plant, not even wait on your irrigation system, get it planted, come back after it's grown in, put in the irrigation. And it's actually, the drainage system is more important than the irrigation system on properties like that. And so, yeah, as you get around the world, there are places where, and the reality too is if you look at where golf originated in Scotland and places like that, a lot of those courses didn't really have much in the way of irrigation. If it was wet, it was green, and if it was brown, it was dry.
Oh, wow.
So but that's kind of the case now. And but then you go to places like Saudi Arabia where not only is it arid and dry, but there's really no water. So they have to curate their water. They have to desal their water. So you got extremes like that, and then you got places where all you're doing is trying to fend off the water and keep it off the turf because you're trying to get hard and fast conditions.
Oh. So right now, Southeast Asia, I would guess Indonesia and Southeast Asia is a fairly decent place to focus for design and updates.
Yeah, I think that's it's funny, the market. We've been really fortunate, I think, for all these years because a lot of architects focus on a market. I do Southwest U.S. or I do the Northeast U.S. And when times are good, it's great. And then when the rug gets pulled out of the economy, they're all looking at each other and, where can I go now? And so we've been fortunate where we've always kind of been really diversified in our areas of work because, Vietnam can be hot, then it slows off, and then Indonesia picks up, and then Phnom Penh, Cambodia picks up, but then everything, it's like any real estate cycle, if there's a demand, then it gets overbuilt and it slows down. Then it comes back and it gets overbuilt. So, it's kind of that same cycle of housing or commercial or whatever. Golf kind of happens that way. They tend to feed the market, overbuild the market catches up, and then you come back. But the good thing about doing work, and if you do that in Scottsdale, Arizona, if you're too early to the party here, you go bankrupt because the operation costs are so expensive. Your revenues are here, your operations costs are here.
Yep.
And whereas you can go to parts of Southeast Asia where it costs something to build, but the operation costs are so low that if that course doesn't do the rounds for a year, 2 years, 5 years, the owner's like, lost 200 grand last year, and they trip over that money, and it's like, it's okay. It's not like some markets where if you're not doing the revenues, first person in loses it, second person in loses it, third person finally makes money when the market catches up to it. But that's why, and I think that's why you see a lot of work in Indonesia or in Asia, and any kind of markets that are growing is they if they can get over the land costs and construction costs, the actual operation costs of facilities is tolerable, even if the numbers don't happen on the revenue side. The operation costs can be scaled back to where you can really fend off the bleeding to where it's not detrimental to the long-term success.
Okay. Well, it seems like a quite interesting market to be in. We're going to put your links, your website and your email address and your contact links within the content here. So all the hotel managers, resort managers who want to enhance their course or build a course, they can connect with you. So it's all going to be.
And I would, yeah, and one thing I would kind of add, even though our focus is golf, my background, getting back to that early schooling days, my background isn't landscape architect like so many, but it's actually master planning. I came out as a master planner, physical master planner. So we get involved with a lot of jobs as not only as the golf architect in the initial stages, but as the master planner for development, for resorts, for all that stuff. And I travel the world, and I'm always obviously looking at golf, but I also look at development and how resorts work and keeping up with the times on what's happening in the marketplace of the built environment as well. Because a lot of our job early on is to work out the big picture. And so to those people out there who are thinking, I'd like to do, a development, a resort with golf, if you can one-stop shop with the golf architect coordinating the initial master planning, it's great. Because what happens, a lot of times they'll start with a master planner with an architect or whatever, and someone will scratch out, here's the golf course. And inevitably that person, if they don't know what they're doing, it doesn't work. And once golf doesn't work, it's a domino effect. This hole moves, that hole moves, that hole moves, and all of a sudden the whole plan gets redone. So if you can start with a golf architect who understands the big picture of master planning, you get to the finish line a lot faster, and you don't burn a lot of time and effort that gets tossed in the garbage along the way. So I think that's one of the big selling points of us, is that our services go well beyond just the actual golf course construction. And we get involved in the master planning. There are very few projects where we got involved in a project after a master plan was already done. We're normally the first one in, storming the beach, getting it done from the beginning.
Okay, I've noticed in countries like Laos, Pakistan, many countries now, there's a concept of smart cities or special economic zones where they're designing the whole city and they're including golf course. So you can get involved with the full community development, community design, as well as a golf course. Seems to be
absolutely, yeah,
coming up as well.
Sure. And I tell you, every project's different, but it goes like you want to understand where the golf is, what golf fits the terrain easiest, leaves the best land for development, golf low, development up, blah blah blah. But also work out a circulation system, and you just want to get the thing pushed far enough along that then those disciplines that are resort people or housing people or whatever that built environment might be, the parcels and the land they're working with makes sense. I don't have to actually, I can conceptually scratch stuff out, but it just makes things a lot easier, and you avoid a lot of those hiccups, because it's always a big fight early on. It's like, the architects want the best land. Everybody's fighting for the best land. And, I always look at it, what's the best land? What's the best product for the client who ultimately wants to make money and have a successful development, right? So you have to have an understanding of the big picture, and don't just grab the best stuff. Understand that, hey, that beach is worth $20 million in the big picture here. And so if we put a golf hole right there, it better be worth that effort, because otherwise, that prohibits them being able to use that to generate a hotel site or whatever it happens to be. So, I understand who butters the bread. Golf is an important element, but it's not always the only thing. But, my job is to make everything work together, and try to make in that process, then try to make the golf as good as it can be, but understand the big picture, and that it's more than golf at times. Sometimes it's just a golf course, and there's a little clubhouse, and that's great too.
Well, for those who are watching and listening, we're likely going to do a follow-up with Brian Curley in a few months or later this year. to let you know of any updates that are going on with Schmidt-Curley Design. Also, we have our golf issue coming out in the coming weeks. Please have a read of that. We'll be doing updates with Brian on a periodic basis, so stay in touch. We appreciate Brian's time, and thank you very much, Brian.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me, Bill. It's great. Yeah, I look forward. I will definitely keep things up. I've got a lot of things. Now it didn't used to be this way. Nowadays, you sign these NDAs that keep you from talking about stuff. And so I would love to be here and just like, well, I'm working on this, and this, but I got to like zip it on a lot of things right now. So yeah, I'll come back and we'll have all the dog and pony show of all the new stuff going on.
That's great. So I appreciate your time, and thank you.
Okay.